"Crikey, Carter, take a look at that," Doogie exclaimed. I followed his gaze to the far side of the lounge and immediately spotted what had caught his attention. She was a striking woman, barely 5 feet tall but curvaceous in form. She wore a snug gray-blue suit jacket and a matching knee-length skirt that accentuated her shapely body. The collar of her white blouse peeked out from under the jacket, partly hidden by a cascade of beautiful auburn curls. Indeed, she was quite the sight. "Lovely," I remarked, turning back to my friend. "Smashing, I'd say," he quickly replied. Douglas Doogie Cruikshank always had a flair for exaggeration when it came to women. "Just your size, don't you think? Are you suggesting I'm short?" I grinned, giving him a playful jab. "Well, you're not tall, sport." "True enough, but I'm trying not to focus on it." "Well, she certainly seems to fit your needs." "My needs right now are for a personal assistant. Mrs. Dalrymple is leaving in 3 weeks, and so far, I haven't seen anyone who would be a suitable replacement. Hire a young one and train her. Can't be that difficult, can it?" Doogie was ever the optimist. He had no idea of the complexities involved in my new role. I needed more than just a secretary. I required someone with exceptional organizational skills, a thick skin, a flexible schedule, and impeccable manners. As the newest and youngest vice president in Vancouver, I had serious responsibilities and needed a personal assistant who could help me focus on my primary tasks while handling the rest. Doogie had come out of the British business world, and although he was 2 years my senior, he was now a couple of departments and rank removed from me. We had become friends years ago, not long after I started with Emerald Precision Instruments. I was sent to Manchester to see how the other half lived, as my new boss put it. I quickly discovered that the other half worked at half speed and double the manpower. Not a formula for success. Douglas Cruikshank was one of the few who knew what was wrong and didn't hesitate to say so. Our 2-man conspiracy ultimately changed the complexion of the UK operations and promptly pushed both of us upward in the organization and off to Vancouver. Now, 5 years later at the ripe old age of 33, Carter Moore, was given the VP title, an unheard-of salary, the promise of a substantial bonus for achieving my objectives, a company car, a liberal expense account, and a personal assistant. Regrettably, Mrs. Eunice Dalrymple took an instant dislike to some young whippersnapper coming into her domain and promptly requested an early retirement. Probably just as well. I didn't think we had much in common, but it left me with a rather large hole in my organizational chart. My boss made it clear that I wouldn't survive a month without a personal assistant. I took his word for it. "Doogie, I have to get back to the office. I've got another 2 interviews this afternoon. Pray for me, son. I really need to find a nugget among the dross. Good luck, Carter. I'll see you later with the girls." The girls were several of the office women and a few of the guys who met up on Friday after work for a drink before heading off to our various homes. I wasn't sure it was kosher for me to be part of it anymore after my promotion to the upper echelons, but I decided that I wanted to stay in touch with my former coworkers. I always found the pulse of the operation could be felt when they relaxed and let their hair down. I just hoped that wouldn't change now that I was one of the bosses. I finished off my tonic water and lime and left a $10 bill on the table. It would only just cover my non-alcoholic drink and Doogie's beer along with a tip. Vancouver was getting to be a very expensive place to live. Doogie had wandered off to chat with some friends and possibly with the attractive woman he'd pointed out to me. He was a confident young man. I walked back to the office, knowing I faced 2 interviews that afternoon and hoping that I'd find someone to fill the role of PA. I was getting desperate, and I didn't want to settle for someone I knew wouldn't pan out and then have to be the one to let them go. I really didn't care if the person were male or female, but for some reason I had it fixed in my mind that PS were normally women. When I thought about it, I would probably be better off with a man. Much less complicated. Fewer potential problems, I thought. I walked by the vacant desk outside my office and poured myself a glass of water from the cooler. I had a mountain of paper stacked in front of me with no idea how much of it was urgent and needed my immediate attention. I had spent 2 hours of my too short morning interviewing candidates for the open position with no success. In the meantime, it took 2 hours out of my morning that I could have been using to tackle the unsorted work on my desk. Mrs. Dalrymple had already decided I should be the judge of what was important, since she didn't know my priorities and didn't want to bother getting to know them either. She was marking time until her last day. Mrs. Dalrymple was a late 50s to early 60s woman of severe appearance. Very formal, very stiff, and very opinionated. She was married, and I often wondered what her husband must be like. A Casper milquetoast? That would seem to fit her personality, if you could call it that. I imagined her to be a domineering type in her home, and I pitied the poor devil she went home to. She didn't pull that sort of nonsense around the office since I had arrived. My predecessor, however, was also of retirement age, and I suspect she might have treated him much like I imagined she treated her husband. Which one was really the vice president? My 1:30 appointment was 10 minutes early, and I was almost grateful for it. At least I could get the interview going in the off chance that I might have a winner. 10 minutes later, I knew it wasn't to be the case. The middle-aged man who had applied simply didn't have the skills or the personal strength to do what was needed. He took notes by hand, explaining he had little faith in computers. He was also timid, which didn't fit with me at all. I needed someone with some personal horsepower, not some wimp who would give me a basket full of yes sir, no sir. I was borderline depressed when I concluded the interview and told him the usual. We'll be in touch. I had scheduled the second appointment for 3 that afternoon, and since I had over an hour to go, I dug into the pile of paper and quickly got lost in sorting through it. As a result, when Mrs. Dalrymple knocked briefly on my open door to announce the next candidate, I was caught by surprise. I looked at my watch. It was precisely 3 o'clock. Ms. Mulcahy is here for her appointment, the older woman announced with a look of displeasure. Send her in, please. I stood to receive my guest and immediately realized I had seen this woman before. Ms. Mulcahy turned out to be the lovely auburn-haired woman in the restaurant that Doogie had spotted. As she approached, I held out my hand to greet her, and she took it firmly. Mr. Moore, nice to meet you, she said with a slight smile. She didn't appear to be nervous, and she was dressed to impress. Other than what nature had bestowed upon her, she was conservative in appearance and dress. You'll pardon me if I butcher your first name, so please save me the embarrassment and tell me how it is pronounced. That brought about another slight smile. It's Siobhan, she said. I looked at her resume and tried to make sense of the spelling. Siobhan didn't look anything like Siobhan. I'd have never have gotten it right without your help, I said with a grin. For a Scotsman, you surprise me that it's not familiar to you. The Irish are neighbors, you know. Ah, well, my Scots ancestors are 150 or so years back in the family history. We've been in this country since 1844. But at least I recognize that your name was Irish. Like you, my family has been here a long time as well. But that's not why I'm here today, is it? She smiled. No, I'm looking for a personal assistant. I've just taken on this job, and I need someone to be my right hand. It's a demanding job, and I'm looking for someone special. Someone who can cope and organize and think quickly in stressful situations. It's far more than being a secretary, and of course it pays far more than a secretary. I take it Dragon Lady is leaving then? She said. I snorted a laugh, clapped my hand over my mouth, then surrendered. I was laughing quietly at her characterization of Mrs. Dalrymple. Yes, she is, I finally managed. She's taking an early retirement. Not a moment too soon, she retorted, still not cracking a smile. I was laughing again. She was saying out loud all the things that I had been thinking about the woman. She was certainly taking a risk, but I had a feeling that she saw it as a calculated risk. It wasn't meant as a joke, but as a critical comment. When I got myself under control again, I passed a 2-page document to her. This describes the duties as I see them. It may not be complete because I've never done this job before. I'm going by what I've been told and what I've observed. Why don't you read it over, and we can discuss any questions or concerns you may have afterwards. She nodded, still showing little emotion other than the serious expression she entered the room with. I picked up a memo I had been reading before Ms. Mulcahy had arrived and continued to review it. I had barely finished it when she spoke. I have a couple of questions. Go ahead, I said. Are you married, Mr. Moore? No, I'm not. Are you in a serious relationship with anyone? Ms. Mulcahy, why do you need to know? According to your job description, we'll be traveling on occasion. The last thing you or I need is a jealous wife or girlfriend. Yes. I see. Well, there is no one to be jealous, I can assure you. She nodded. May I ask you a question in return? Yes. Are you married or in a relationship? I saw the beginning of a smile before she returned to her serious look. You're not supposed to ask me that, but no one to interfere with the job. She sat saying nothing, but examining me and concentrating on something. I was about to break the silence when she spoke. I have an offer for you. You do? What kind of offer? Give me 1 hour to go through that stack of paper on your desk that you obviously haven't had the time to attack yet. I'll sort out the important stuff, the irrelevant stuff, and the items that we need to discuss or that I need some direction on. At the end of the hour, you can evaluate my worth to you. Are you serious? You don't know anything about this business. How will you make those kinds of decisions? Business is business, Mr. Moore. There's a common thread through it all. I'm good at sorting out the wheat from the chaff. It's a skill I have that you will find quite valuable. I sat for a moment, thinking, what did I have to lose? This was the first candidate I had interviewed that even showed any spark at all. All right. Is an hour enough? I'll give you more if you want it. She smiled again, this time a little more confidently. Let's see how I do in 1 hour. Then we can talk. Where do you want to work? Right here. I'll pass you the important stuff, and you can look it over. I won't interrupt you. This was more than unusual. I was fascinated with her confidence and her aggressive nature. But it did bring up a question. Before you get started, assuming you do well, do you want this job? Yes. I can't think of a better way to work my way up in a corporation. I'll be side by side with a very bright young man with a good future. I'll know what you know. I'll go where you go. Sooner or later, I'll get my chance. How do you know I'm upward bound? You're young, very young for the job you have. That means you're an achiever. You don't strike me as one of those hard-assed men who steps all over people to get where they want to go. So that means you're smart. If I'm going to succeed, I need a mentor. You could be it. I leaned back in my chair. This was no ordinary woman. For the first time, I began to believe that I might have found my new PA. I would be fascinated to see how she did with my in-basket. I nodded and grinned at her, pushing the pile of paper toward her. Go to it. Tell me if you need help. Would you like some water or tea or coffee? Water, please. I rose and poured 2 tall glasses of water and returned to my desk. There were already 2 pieces of paperback on my blotter. I placed a glass in front of her and picked up one of the pieces. It was important, all right. It was a problem in the Montreal plant that needed attention right away. Would it bother you if I made a phone call? She looked up briefly and shook her head, returning to examining the document in front of her. I called the Montreal office and left a message for the operations manager to call me at home after 9 o'clock his time. I put the note in my briefcase and picked up the next document. There were now 5 or 6 items on my desk, and Siobhan had barely looked up. This was quite a demonstration, and I was getting more and more convinced that she would be the woman to get this job. She worked through the complete pile in a little over an hour. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair and took a sip of water. Everything she had passed to me was indeed important, and I would want to deal with promptly. Tell me about the other 2 piles, Siobhan. These are inconsequential memos that probably don't affect you. Certainly not urgent. The other pile is people wanting you to do their jobs for them, she said with straight face. Show me, I said. She passed 4 memos from the first pile. I looked at them briefly. She was right. They weren't important. Mostly they were copies of memos from other people in my department. I didn't see anything in them that was urgent or sent up any warning signals. How about the other pile? Again, she passed me the top 5 pages. In fact, they were requests for me to do what other management or staff people should and could be doing. This pile is important in a different way, I said to her. Yes. You'll need to let these people know that you pay them to do these jobs. If you do them, you don't need them, she said in a direct tone. Exactly. This may be a hangover from my predecessor, but I'll soon know. I leaned back in my chair once more and examined Miss Siobhan Mulcahy. There was no doubt she was an attractive woman, neatly dressed and turned out as well. She was smart, very smart, and she had a direct, no-nonsense manner about her that I admired. In short, she was perfect for the job. When can you start? I asked. Would Monday be too soon? Not at all. Why don't we go down to the HR department and get you signed up? I take it the stated salary and benefits are acceptable? Yes, for now, she grinned. It was the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. I took it that she was pleased she had won the job. Welcome to Emerald, Siobhan. I think you're going to do very well here. She turned and this time gave me a much bigger and happier smile. I think so too. I left Siobhan with Patricia Carlson in HR to get the paperwork done and formalize her hiring. I had already decided that Mrs. Dalrymple could begin her retirement as soon as she had shown her replacement where everything was located and how things worked. I doubted it would take a week. Mrs. Dalrymple, I have hired Ms. Mulcahy to be my personal assistant. She is a very astute and gifted young lady. As a result, if you wish, you may begin your retirement as soon as you feel she has been brought up to speed on your responsibilities. Naturally, I'll leave it to you to decide when would be appropriate. I saw her face turn red and I was sure I was in for an explosion, but her inbred sense of decorum wouldn't let her lose her temper and she slowly calmed down. Very well, Mr. Moore. I expect 2 or 3 days next week should suffice. If you don't mind, I'd like to say goodbye to some of the staff before I go. Of course. Would you please see Patricia in HR so that she can handle the retirement documents? Otherwise, the keys to the office, desks, and file cabinets can be left with me. Thank you very much for your long and loyal service, Mrs. Dalrymple. I got a harumph in reply. She was viewing my remarks as a dismissal, and she was right. Out with the old and in with the new. Life goes on. I was back at my desk, going through the items that Siobhan had marked as important, and as usual, I lost track of time. When a firm knock on my doorframe announced her return, I looked at my watch and saw it was 5:15. "Don't forget Montreal will be calling your home at 6, she said with a smile. "You're all signed up and officially an employee of Emerald then?" "Yes, and thank you. I really wanted this job. I won't let you down." "No, I'm sure you won't. Good night, Siobhan, and have a good weekend." "Good night, Mr. Moore. See you Monday morning." I took the stack of important papers and put them in my briefcase. I was about to add the other 2 stacks just to make sure there wasn't anything in there that should be attended to when I stopped. It was my first test. I couldn't afford the time to check all her work. I had to trust her. So far, I didn't see any reason not to. I closed my briefcase with a smile and locked my desk. It was time to go home. "Are you telling me that you hired that lovely bird from the restaurant?" "I did indeed, Doogie. She was the answer to my prayers." "I'm sure she was, but can she do the job?" "Doogie, get your mind out of the gutter. She's a very bright, very motivated young lady who will be excellent at her job. And she's got a fine body. I have my suspicions of you, Carter Moore. You know my rules, Doogie. Never foul your own nest." "Yeah, well, just remember your rules when she's around," he warned with a sly grin. I'd found Doogie Cruikshank to be an invaluable aid when it came to the marketing side of our business. I was a born and bred operations guy and needed to learn more about what made successful marketing strategy. It was a matter of matching the needs of the market to our capability. It was no use building wonderful machines that no one was interested in. Doogie was in charge of UK sales at our Manchester operation when I first met him. He was a bright spark in an otherwise dim group. I had been sent as the hatchet man to trim out the fat and either fix it or forget it. My first instinct was to forget it and dispose of the moribund operation. Doogie convinced me otherwise. He was an interesting mix of accents. Born and schooled in London, moved to Glasgow, Birmingham, and Southampton, so you couldn't really pick out any particular region in his voice. He was bright, optimistic, hardworking, and successful at what he did. He was also the savior of the Manchester operation by showing me what it could be rather than what it was. It took more than a year to radically change the culture there, but when we were done, it was one of our most efficient operations. It also earned both of us a promotion. Doogie was my eyes and ears in the marketplace. He was responsible for marketing support. That is, making sure that problems or opportunities that arose in the field were promptly addressed and action taken. It was a make-work job in its origin, a place to put an underachieving sales manager. Doogie changed all that and made it something very valuable. He was a conduit to management and the other departments, and he was very good at his job. He would give you the impression he was a carefree playboy, but I knew differently. He had a long-standing lady friend whom he had finally convinced to move to Canada and accept his proposal. Sandra Smith-Pelly was pure London, through and through. She'd been to the best schools and was expected to marry into one of the prominent English families. Her parents didn't count on Doogie getting in the way. Sassy, as she was generally known, was a strong-willed woman who was having none of her parents' plans for her future. She was tall, slender, regal in her posture, and attractive but not spectacular. Considering Doogie's penchant for extroverted women, she was a strange choice. Yet, there wasn't any doubt that he loved her, and that his comments directed at her opposite type were just talk. She had arrived in Vancouver only a few weeks ago, and promptly moved into Doogie's condominium on False Creek. As far as she was concerned, this was heaven, and she never planned to leave. I complained to Doogie. Wyatt is expecting me to present the plan for next year at the management meeting in November. I'm not very pleased with what I see. I've inherited a do-nothing plan as far as I can tell. Maybe you can give me some ideas, Doogie. Most of my worries are how we're going to deal with the Chinese invasion. They're going to show up sooner or later. I hope we're ready for them. You know what they're like. They'll blitz the bloody market first with pricing to knock off the weak links. I nodded. I'm getting everyone's attention, but the ones that count. I have a feeling we're going to have to do something radical to survive that bombing. How radical? Maybe close and consolidate operations? I suggested. That won't exactly fit with the boss man's ideas for growth, will it? Nope. But to grow, first you have to survive. We can warn the troops, but if they aren't believers, then we're shouting into the wind. Doogie nodded. You'll come up with something, Carter. I know you. You'll find something, somewhere. Thanks for the vote of confidence, but I've only been in this job for a few weeks, and I'm not sure I'm going to get a receptive audience. No one wants to hear from Chicken Little. I picked up the last of my ale, briefly considered ordering a second, then decided against it. Time to go home, Doogie. Sassy will be waiting for you. no doubt. And who's waiting for you, Carter? Not a soul. You need to do something about that, my friend. I don't know what I did without Sassy here for the past year or so. What are your plans for the weekend? Nothing, right now. November isn't the best time for golf, and it's too damn cold to go sailing with Lou. I swear he'd break ice to get out on that boat of his. I don't blame him, Doogie said. That's a lovely craft. I'd go anytime, and Sassy would too. She loves to sail. Lou knows that, I laughed. You only hint at it every time you see him. Do you think he'd sell a share in it? You know, sort of a timeshare? I shrugged. Ask him. What's the worst he can say? Doogie nodded, drained his scotch, and set the glass down. Time to go, Carter. I'll see you Monday, he smiled. Try and have some fun this weekend. Will you? Will do, Doogie. Say hi to Sassy for me. See you Monday. For a change, Saturday morning dawned clear and bright. Fresh snow on the Lions and Grouse Mountain set off the spectacular view from my apartment. I'd chosen this particular unit because it had a view of both the North Shore Mountains and English Bay. It came with a price tag, but my needs were simple. One bedroom with a den that I could use as an office, a compact kitchen, I'm not much of a cook, a full-sized bathroom, and a large living room with a window wall and balcony facing northwest. We were well into the rainy season in Vancouver, but it beat the hell out of the snow and cold winds of the east. It wasn't the most convenient location for a head office, but it was the traditional home for Emerald Precision Instruments, and it would remain so for the foreseeable future. I didn't mind at all. A couple of extra hours flying time to the various plants was a small price to pay for the pleasure of living on the West Coast. Or, as we referred to it at this time of year, the Wet Coast. My apartment was on the southwest edge of Stanley Park, not far from the beach at English Bay, and only 3 blocks from the park. I could ride my bike or walk or jog my way around the seawall on a moment's notice. I hardly needed my car during the week. The office was less than a mile away, and a brisk walk or a bike ride on most mornings was good exercise for me. My building had an indoor pool and an exercise room which I used regularly to keep fit. What more could I want? I'd been living here now for almost 5 years. I'd been promoted to assistant to the vice president of operations when I returned from Manchester, and then, 3 months ago, I was given the title of vice president of operations. The former vice president had retired, and my new boss, senior vice president Wyatt Hendricks, had picked me out to succeed him. It was quite a surprise, considering I was barely 33 years old. But apparently, I'd been noticed and followed and tested enough that they were willing to take the chance with me. I was flattered, to be sure. I had my reservations about working for Wyatt. He'd been in his job for years and had a reputation for being very conservative in his thinking. My predecessor, George Christensen, had been the closest to Wyatt of anyone in the organization. George got the unfortunate tag of being a brown-noser somewhere along the line, and it had stuck. He was constantly waiting for Wyatt to tell him what he wanted, and then running around trying to deliver it. Wyatt was the buffer between the CEO and the 3 vice presidents: operations, finance, and marketing. There were times when I wondered just how important that role was, but it had been established long before I arrived, and everyone seemed to accept it. When I sat with Wyatt to discuss my promotion, he made it plain I was to report to him and no one else. I didn't have any problem with that. It was the way a corporate hierarchy was supposed to work. I was clear with him that I considered close cooperation with sales and marketing to be important, and while he wasn't exactly enthusiastic, he at least acknowledged the need to stay in touch with our salespeople and our customers. Wyatt was also a loner, from what I could see. I had only met his wife, Marion, a couple of times at social functions. She was a lovely lady with a warm personality when it was drawn out, or when she wasn't standing in Wyatt's shadow. She seemed to be such an opposite of Wyatt, but then I thought the same about Sassy and Doogie as well. In the office, Wyatt's other contacts were his executive assistant, Donna Witherspoon, and our CEO, Johnson Saunders. From what I could tell, few of us knew Wyatt Hendricks very well at all. As I gazed out the window at the splendid vista, my thoughts drifted back to Karen, my one and only love affair. I was taking my MBA at Western Ontario, and she was in her 3rd year of commerce. We'd met at a friend's social and almost instantly hit it off. I got her phone number that night and called her the next day. Within a month, we were inseparable. I wasn't a virgin when I met her, and neither was she, but we both had a lot to learn, it turned out. When I finished my MBA, I returned to my former job in Toronto, already working for Emerald. They had generously allowed me time to get my postgraduate degree, and while most of it was on my own time, they were anxious to see me complete my studies and made sure they cleared the path for me. I owed a great deal to Emerald and their management, and I wanted to repay them in my work. I was positive I was in love with Karen, but she was in her senior year at Western, and I couldn't possibly commute from London to Toronto. I would make the 3-hour drive every Friday night and return on Sunday night, spending at least 2 days with her each week. It wasn't ideal, but I was very serious about her, and nearing the end of her school year, I proposed. She turned me down. I'm sorry, Carter. I'm not ready to marry. I want to live a little and work on my career for a while. It's been wonderful to be with you, but I'm not the girl for you. When will you be ready? I whined. I don't know. I'm certainly not in a rush, as you can tell. You're a good guy, and we've had a very nice time together, but it's not going to be permanent. I'm sorry. Yeah, I said, defeated. I am too. And that was the end of my one and only love affair. It had been one-sided, and I hadn't even recognized it. I was a convenience to her, nothing more. I felt like a fool for some time after that, alternating between anger and self-pity. A few weeks later, I forced myself back into the dating game and took a much less serious attitude toward women. If they could play, I could play too. But that got old fairly quickly. When I was sent to Manchester, a combination of a difficult work situation and the ever-ebullient Doogie Cruikshank helped bring me out of that phase. I dated off and on, got lucky more than a few times, and generally didn't take myself too seriously. I didn't think English women could hold a candle to Canadian women, but then I was biased, wasn't I? When my time was up in England, I insisted that Doogie be included in our corporate plans and laid out my reasoning with chapter and verse to Wyatt Hendricks and Clarence Woolfolk. The marketing VP happily, they agreed, and Doogie was offered the job of marketing support. He made that job something important with his actions, not his words. Time and again, he saved the company from making fundamental mistakes in the marketplace. I give him credit for steadfastly turning what was an operational environment into a customer-responsive environment. It took a while to show results, but when they came, Doogie got the well-deserved credit as well as a raise and a promotion. I suspected they were grooming him for bigger things, perhaps VP of marketing. Monday morning dawned dull and rainy. Dark enough that I didn't want to ride my bike for fear of being run down by some unwary commuter. I decided that my umbrella and raincoat would do. If it got too ugly, I could hop a bus for the few blocks I had to go. As I stepped off the elevator on the 9th floor, I could see lights on in the area of my office. Usually, I was the first one on the floor, but not this morning. As I hung up my wet raincoat in the closet and stowed the umbrella, I wondered who would be here this early. It was barely 7 o'clock. I walked down the hall and almost immediately encountered Siobhan Mulcahy. She looked spectacularly bright and shiny in the gloom of that morning. She was immaculately dressed in another business suit and greeted me with a cup of coffee as I approached her desk. Good morning, Mr. Moore, she smiled. And good morning to you, Ms. Mulcahy. But would you mind if I called you Siobhan and you called me Carter, or at the most Carter? Very well, but not when the brass are about, okay? Good thinking, Siobhan. That's how it will be then. So what are you doing here this early in the morning? I'm your personal assistant, Carter. I'm expected to be here when you are. I only had to ask one person to find out what your hours were. Hopefully, with my help, we can cut them back a little, she grinned. A worthy objective, to be sure. I'm not work-obsessed, just in case you're wondering. Right now I'm still trying to learn this job and determine where the biggest problems are located. That's where I come into the picture, she stated simply. We will begin to prioritize your concerns immediately. There didn't seem to be any doubt in her voice. But then, when I had gone over the papers I had taken with me on Friday evening, she had made a faultless judgment that each of them was important. I assumed then that the lesser things could be dealt with when opportunity or time permitted. I reviewed the items you segregated on Friday, I said, and I've put them in priority order. Let's go over them so you'll know my thinking. She nodded and I began with the first item. For the next 2 hours we reviewed each of the items in order, and she made some brief notes when appropriate. She also asked some penetrating questions for background, and paid close attention as I explained my thinking. I could almost see her storing this information away in her head, or was I imagining it? We stopped for an early coffee break, and I broke tradition and got the coffee myself for both of us. Can I ask you a personal question? I said as we sat and sipped the coffee. That depends on how personal. I'm curious. I'm not allowed to ask your age, but I can see you're quite young. How in the world did you get this much experience and professionalism at your age? I got a nice smile in reply. Thank you for the compliment. My father was CEO of a mid-sized distribution firm in the electronics industry. He had a heart attack at an early age and was forced to try and run the company from home. In the evening, I would help him do what you and I just did, sort out the priorities. He would fax them off to his office that night, and his VP of operations would see that his instructions were carried out. I learned a lot from him before I went off to college. You were very lucky, I noted. You had the perfect teacher, and he taught you well. I'll have to call him someday and compliment him on that. I saw the look on her face change immediately and knew something was amiss. I'm afraid you're too late. He died not long after I left home. He never really recovered from the first heart attack, but he wasn't sick enough to get on the transplant list. Oh, I'm very sorry. You and your mother must miss him a great deal. She nodded. Yes, I really miss him. I'm trying to do all the things that he did. Except for the heart attack, she smiled shyly through some tears. If first impressions mean anything, I think he would be very proud of you. Thank you. I'll try and live up to that. The next 6 months were hectic and full of travel. Siobhan and I had to visit each of the operations and determine how they were doing on a first-hand basis, and not just from the reports and results we received monthly. We became far too familiar with airport lounges and hotel rooms as a result. We both flew business class and stayed in the better hotels, although not always the 5-star ones. I was surprised and delighted how easily Siobhan slipped into her role and how professional she was among our staff and key customers. Part of my ambition was to visit our key clients and hear directly from them the things we did well and the things we needed to improve on. I got the impression that there had been very little of that from the previous senior management. It had been left to the local management to show the flag. I felt they needed more support, and that was my objective. Siobhan was at my side at all the visits and customer calls. As she became more comfortable and confident in her job, she began to participate and interact with both groups. I was impressed and delighted when she would ask about something I had missed or forgotten. She never lacked for preparation or curiosity. She was as happy on the shop floor with the workers as she was in the boardroom with CEOs. I had found a gem and I knew it. All along, however, our relationship was strictly business. As much as I was tempted, I kept her at arm's length. I was sure that was what she expected, and I wasn't about to mess with success. God knows I was tempted, however. She was quite a woman. Dark brown penetrating eyes, flawless complexion, lightly applied makeup, a variety of perfectly tailored business dresses and suits that never failed to appear as if they were being worn for the first time. It was early on in our travels that I discovered some other things about her. I was in the habit of using the exercise facilities in the hotels we stayed at. In fact, I asked Siobhan to make sure those facilities were available if we were staying at a new location. I would normally rise early, spend 45 to 60 minutes exercising, then return to my room for a shower and shave before putting on my business clothes. On our first trip to Chicago, we were staying at the Marriott Oakbrook as I had in the past, and I was down to the gym facilities before 6 that morning. 5 minutes later, a bright-looking Siobhan arrived wearing a tracksuit and a scarf around her head. "What are you doing here at this time of day?" I asked with a smile. "The same as you," she said. "Getting my daily exercise. Keeping myself from getting fat on this hotel food we're going to be eating." "Yeah, I know what you mean. Even their healthy choices aren't really that healthy. Is this part of your normal routine?" she asked. "Absolutely. You already know I either ride my bike or walk to work. There's an exercise room in my apartment building that I can use when I want to. I've also got Stanley Park almost at my doorstep, so I've got no excuses when I'm at home. On the road, this is usually all I can find. I think it's a good habit, Carter. I'll make sure I check up on you each morning," she kidded. "Thank you. You're my incentive then," I said. I saw her look at me with a wrinkled forehead and a slight frown for a moment, and I wonder what I might have said wrong. I put the earbuds for my MP3 player back in my ears and continued pedaling on the stationary bike. Whatever I did to cause her to look at me that way seemed to disappear almost immediately, and she began her workout on the rowing machine. She had removed the tracksuit and was wearing a t-shirt and snug-fitting shorts. It was the first time I had really seen what she looked like out of her office uniform. She was even more voluptuous than I realized. I began to fantasize without even thinking about it. When I became aware of it, I tried immediately to purge my thoughts, but it wasn't easy. When we left to return to our rooms, we agreed to meet at 7:30 in the restaurant before heading to the office in Lombard. When she appeared exactly at 7:30, she was immaculately dressed and coiffed and showed no signs of the vigorous workout she had engaged in as little as 30 minutes ago. She was obviously very fit, and that became our routine on the road. We would be picked up, usually by the general manager, for a plant tour and a meeting with the staff. Then the remainder of our stay would be taken up dealing with any problems and visiting any nearby customers. In some cases, we would stay an extra day or two in order to visit key clients who were not close to the specific plant or distribution center. Our trips were generally from 3 to 5 days, and their frequency about once a month. At the end of 6 months, I submitted my review on Siobhan, and Wyatt received it with raised eyebrows. "Is she really this good, or are you being swayed by a very lovely young woman?" he asked with a cocked eyebrow, and what I almost took for a smirk. "She's really that good," I assured him. "Check with anyone, particularly our GMS and key clients. She's that good and more. I was a bit pissed off with Wyatt that he would insinuate that I was influenced by her looks and not her talent. I had been extremely careful when I wrote the review to back it up with fact, and proven fact at that. I also knew that a couple of Wyatt Hendricks' colleagues had encountered Siobhan Mulcahy and had come away impressed. When he put her review before the salary committee, I was pretty confident that there wasn't going to be any legitimate dissent. I'd like to have a talk with her then, Carter. I'd like to get to know this Wonder Girl a little better. I'll let you know when, but it'll be before I take this to the salary committee. The salary committee was comprised of Johnson Saunders, Wyatt Hendricks, Clarence Woolfolk, and Linda Powell, VP of Finance. I would be expected to join the committee next year. I nodded. I couldn't very well object, but I didn't like the idea that he didn't trust my evaluation. That was something I was going to have to find a way to deal with. I'd had no such problem when I submitted my reviews of the various operations managers at the branches. Why now with Siobhan? I called her into the office. I couldn't let her be blindsided by Wyatt Hendricks. Wyatt has asked to meet with you, I said as she sat in front of me. Why? She was clearly curious as I expected she would be. I suspect it's because of your 6-month review. I submitted it to him today in advance of the salary committee meeting. Is it a poor review? She asked, now clearly worried. Hell no. It's graded outstanding, as it should be. I think he's suspicious that I might be overstating your case. Are you? I didn't expect to fail, but I wasn't expecting outstanding either. Why not? You're everything I want and need in a personal assistant. You've learned what's required very rapidly. You work extremely well with our staff, field people, and our customers. You're hyper-organized and, well, you get the picture. I have no complaints whatsoever about your performance. I couldn't think of a single thing I could recommend that you work on to improve. She sat quietly, saying nothing as she absorbed my comments. Are you sure that's accurate? She asked at length. Can you think of an area that you are deficient? Can you name something I can help you with that will improve what you're doing? Yes, of course. I still have a lot to learn. I'm still learning about our products and who our customers are. I've only just scratched the surface as far as Emerald is concerned. Siobhan, you've only been here 6 months. I didn't expect you to be an expert on this business in that little time. What I'm grading you on is how you've performed in that very short period when everything was new to you. 6 months from now, I will have different criteria to judge you by. I'm grateful for your high opinion of me, but I guess I have to say that it hasn't been hard to get accustomed to working with you. You make it very easy for me. Your orders are direct and straightforward. We've worked closely enough that I can almost anticipate what you want some of the time. I'm learning quickly because I get a lot of feedback from you and the other people I work with. That's the way it should be, I said with a smile. I don't want you to worry about talking to Wyatt. He's not a bad guy to work for, and I think he's just surprised that you've come this far this fast. Maybe he wants to satisfy himself that I'm not pushing you too far too fast. Anyway, don't be worried. I wouldn't change a word of my review and I doubt if I'll be asked to. Thank you, Carter. I really appreciate that. I like working here and I want to do a good job. Just promise me you'll tell me if I'm not doing what you expect from me. I smiled again. That's a promise. True to his word, Wyatt called Siobhan and asked her to come to his office at 3 that afternoon. It was a nervous young woman who left for a walk down the hallway to his office. I watched her go, hoping that Wyatt did nothing to discourage or upset her. When I left the office that afternoon, Siobhan still hadn't returned from her meeting with Wyatt Hendricks. I toyed with the idea of waiting for her, but I had an appointment with my dentist at 4:15 and I didn't want to be late. I left wondering what would take them so long in that meeting. When I arrived the following morning, Siobhan was nowhere to be found. That was unusual. She and I were almost like clockwork arriving at 7. There was no note on my desk and nothing on my voicemail. I thought of calling her at home but decided not to. She might be ill, or maybe just had slept in for the first time. She arrived at the office just before 8, walking in and hanging up her light spring coat before seating herself at her desk. She didn't acknowledge me or say good morning. She just sat, looking at her laptop screen, probably reviewing her schedule. I waited a few minutes before I went out to her desk. Good morning, I said, pouring myself a coffee. Morning, she mumbled, not looking at me. Nothing about her behavior was normal. I didn't like the look of this and I decided I'd better try and get to the bottom of it right away. When you have a free moment, come in and see me please, I requested, turning back to my desk. She didn't respond verbally, but a moment later she followed me into the office and sat in her customary chair at the front corner of my desk. I looked at her carefully, noting an almost vacant look about her that wasn't normal. What's wrong? Might as well get to the point right away, I thought. Nothing. Sorry. That doesn't fly. In the 6 months that you've been here, you've never come to work at this time, and you've never been anything but bright and upbeat. So, what's wrong? She shook her head. Nothing, sir. I'm just a little tired, I guess. Sir? Since when did I become sir? She looked up at me, and she seemed to be on the verge of tears. I got up and walked to my door, closing it before returning to my desk. Talk to me, Siobhan. What happened yesterday afternoon? That's what this is about, isn't it? I was taking a quick guess, but her reaction and the look on her face told me I'd hit the bullseye. He didn't believe your performance report. He said I hadn't been here long enough to rate outstanding. That's it? That's all? No. He asked a bunch of personal questions. What kind of personal questions? Who I was dating? Who was I going out with? He was insinuating that that we were sleeping together. Son of a bitch. I hollered, slamming my hand down on my desk. He accused you of sleeping with me to get a good review. Is that the gist of it? She nodded, her head bowed and looking at the desk and not me. Goddamn him anyway. He has no right to accuse you of that. He is way out of bounds and he's going to hear it from me. I spat. No. Please, Carter, don't make it worse. I denied everything, but I can't prove it. You know the truth, but he's just jumping to conclusions. Listen, Siobhan, I can't let him talk to you this way. He's violated a very clearly written and firm policy, and I've got to call him on it. It isn't optional. He just can't do this. But you'll get fired or get a bad review. He's your boss. I don't want to lose my job either. Why don't we just leave it and let it go, Carter? It's over with. He's not going to change your review, so it won't hurt me. That goes against everything I believe in. If we let him get away with it this time, there'll be a next time. Maybe not the same thing, but he won't worry about my calling him on it. Who knows? When my review comes up, he may try the same thing on me. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have a very firm but polite discussion with Wyatt Hendricks about your meeting with him yesterday, and he is going to understand in no uncertain terms that he was out of line. Way out of line. Now Siobhan was in tears. I guess she hadn't had much sleep last night, and for that I was equally angry with Wyatt. The last thing on my mind was job security. I had enough confidence in myself to find another job, even if it wasn't as good as this one. As far as Siobhan went, I was sure she could get a job in a flash with one of our customers based solely on their contact with her. No, this was not the time to worry about our employment future. I picked up the phone and called Wyatt's secretary. Donna, I'd like to see Wyatt as soon as possible, please. Sorry, Carter. He's tied up for the day, she replied a little uncomfortably. Is he out of the office? No. He's here. Is there someone with him? No. No one, she answered clearly and distinctly. Donna, would you please tell Wyatt that if I'm unable to see him in the next hour, I'll see Johnson Saunders instead. I'll tell him right away, Carter, she said. I wasn't sure what I was hearing in her voice, but it wasn't worry. Considering I just threatened to go over him to the CEO, I thought that might cause some concern. She called me back 5 minutes later. He'll see you at 9:30, Carter. Thank you, Donna. I appreciate your help. You're welcome, Carter, and good luck. Why did I think Donna knew more than she was revealing? Had she heard what was going on in Wyatt's office yesterday afternoon? Was Donna still there when you left Wyatt's office yesterday? Yes, I think so. I wasn't really paying much attention. I was upset. I'm sure you were. Well, I'll deal with this when I see Wyatt in a few minutes. Please be careful, Carter. I really need this job. You aren't going to lose your job, Siobhan. If anyone's in danger, it's Wyatt. He's opened himself up to a lawsuit just having that conversation with you. But it's he said, she said, showing a good command of logic. Yeah, but these accusations don't come out of thin air. Someone would want to know why you were in that office in the first place. You report to me. And since the performance review was rated outstanding, what motive would you have to lie? You had nothing to gain. Nope. This one is not going any further unless he does something stupid. She looked distraught and I could understand it. What's on our schedule today? I asked. Mostly updating the costs on the regional shipments for your planning review. Okay, that's nice boring work for both of us. Why don't you get started while I'm down the hall with Wyatt? You know what I'm looking for, so you can go ahead and I'll catch up when I get back. All right, she said without enthusiasm. Siobhan, this is an order. Cheer up. I grinned. She tried. She really did. But I was sure it wasn't going to last until I came back from my meeting with Wyatt in one piece and still holding a job. Come in, Carter. I'm very busy, so I can't give you much time. What is it you want? I think you know perfectly well why I'm here. I have a young woman in my office who is extremely upset at the nature of your meeting with her yesterday afternoon. More to the point, you made an accusation that she and I were intimate. You know, and I know that is out of line. You didn't have an HR person with you, and you didn't have a shred of evidence to support your accusation. I won't put up with that, Wyatt. You were out of line, and you owe her an apology in writing. Who the hell do you think you're talking to, Carter? You may be the golden boy around her, but insubordination is still cause for dismissal. Should we take this discussion to Johnson then? Of course not. I may have said something that your girl misconstrued as improper, but in no way did I act improperly. Well, I guess that's open to interpretation. Let me tell you that Siobhan's interpretation was that you accused her of sleeping her way to an outstanding level review. She's not prone to exaggeration, and you seldom mince your words. At this point, I'm taking her word for it. That girl is wrong. I made no such accusation. We had a private talk, and I might have asked her a couple of personal questions, but I did not make any accusations of any kind. Now this issue is closed. I won't do anything to downgrade her review, but as far as this tempest in a teapot is concerned, I do not want to listen to any more of it. Wyatt, I think you made a mistake with Siobhan. I would hope you recognize it and don't ignore what I said or how I feel about it. I still think you owe her an apology. He had finally cooled down from his high horse posture a few minutes ago. I'll give it some thought, he said sullenly. I nodded and left without another word. I looked at Donna, and she was smiling at me for some reason. She must have heard some of the heated exchange between her boss and me. She got up and walked to the hall with me. Well done, Carter. I'm proud of you. That poor girl was in tears when she left his office yesterday. He can be a real a-hole sometimes. I'll stop by later and let her know everything's going to be fine. Thank you, Donna. She'll be very happy to have you on her side. I walked the short distance back to our office and saw Siobhan anxiously waiting for me. Relax, I smiled reassuringly. We're both still employed. She let a sigh out that sounded like she'd been holding her breath for hours. In fact, I'd only been gone 10 minutes. I asked him to give you an apology and made it clear how unhappy I was with his comments to you. He denied suggesting what you heard, but I had him cornered, and when I threatened to take it to Johnson Saunders, he quickly backed up. Did you really say that? I mean about Johnson? Yes, and I meant it. You'll also find you have an ally in Donna Witherspoon. She was really happy that I confronted him after what he put you through yesterday. I gather she doesn't have a high opinion of Wyatt. I have to say, mine has dropped considerably today. Thank you, Carter. I hope this hasn't hurt your chances here. After all, he is your boss, and he does have a lot of say in the boardroom. Well, in the 5 minutes I've had to think about it, I'm not worried. The one nice thing about operations is that it is measurable. When we do something, we can measure the result. And results speak for themselves. Overall, this department is the shining star around here, and you're part of it. I could see Siobhan cheer up as I spoke. The crisis was over and done with. We could go back to doing our jobs and not worry about it. Wyatt wouldn't dare downgrade her review now. Siobhan's review passed through uncontested, and she received a well-deserved raise in pay. I could see the satisfaction that it brought her. She was being told that she was doing an outstanding job, and the proof was on the paycheck. What she didn't receive was an apology from Wyatt. I toyed with the idea of going after my boss again, but decided to let it lie. I'd made my point, and I was sure Wyatt hadn't forgotten it. After our little drama in May, things settled down and I was able to resume at least civil relations with Wyatt. Neither of us had cause to mention the incident again, but it was in the back of my mind that he would bear watching around the female staff. Doogie and I would find a way to meet after work on Fridays about twice a month. Usually, we'd have just one beer or, in his case, a scotch. It was a way for me to informally stay in touch with marketing. I had invited Siobhan to join us more than once, but she declined. I suspected she thought it was a men-only environment and wouldn't be comfortable. I know Donna invited her to join the girls after work, and on occasion she did stop in with them. Donna told me that my assistant was very well liked by the other women, and that was good to hear. Getting ready for your plan for next year, Doogie? Yeah. The troops are getting nervous about the Chinese again. They're starting to show some signs of being interested in our slice of the market. We're waiting for the first assault. Well, I'm looking at any way we can reduce our costs, I said. That includes maybe closing some distribution points and consolidating our shipping. It isn't the only solution, but it's on the table again. Did I tell you about the man I talked to about China a couple of weeks ago? Doogie said out of the blue. Not that I recall. I was on my way to Montreal, and this geezer sitting next to me had just got off an Air China flight from Beijing and was on his way home. We got to chatting, and he starts to tell me about his strategy to compete with the Chinese. Anyway, he isn't really competing with them. He's just come back from signing a joint venture with them to produce some kind of parts that he will buy and assemble in Quebec. I forgot what they were. Some kind of machine gears or something. Anyway, he was about to get a right thrashing from the Chinese if he didn't do something. So he buggered off to Beijing to talk to the government gets about finding someone to make parts for his company. Shit, they opened the bleeding door for him, put him in touch with 3 or 4 manufacturers, and nearly paved the flippin' road for him. They're also negotiating fully assembled components for some of the cheaper items. Well, it got me to thinking about it. Could we do something like that? You know, maybe get parts made in China and assemble them here? That should help make us more competitive, don't you think? Yeah, it might at that. We'd have to think about how we wanted to do it, but it's a strategy all right. The thing is, we'd have to set the specifications and standards and make sure they could meet them all the time. We'd get killed if they sent us poor or inconsistent quality. No doubt about that, he agreed, but from what I hear, they're gearing up to improve their quality right across the board. They know they've got to be spot on in the technology stuff. I took a sip of my beer as I thought about his suggestion. Doogie, would you be willing to work with me to put a presentation together on the concept? I can't run some of the numbers without costs, but it's the concept I want to explore. We're buying a fair amount of components from outside suppliers now, so we know what those costs are. We might not have enough time to seek out Chinese suppliers and vet them for quality, but we can at least get started. There's a trade commission office in town we can meet with too. I'd love to, he said strongly. Be a damn sight better than the doom and gloom of worrying about what's to come. That's my thinking too. It's going to be a joint venture for us too, Doogie. It's got to work for marketing as well as manufacturing. I like the way you think, Carter. Let's do it. What can I do to get started? Can you get me some examples of Chinese equipment already in the market? We need to have a look and see what their strengths and weaknesses are. We should have done this a while ago, but I guess we didn't really take them seriously until lately. Talk to your guys, too. Get their opinions. They may have some ideas as well. I'll get on it Monday morning, sharpish. When I arrived Monday morning, Siobhan was at her desk as usual. Good morning. Can I see you in my office when you're free? I asked. I'm never free, but always available, she giggled. You're in a good mood this morning. Have a hot date this weekend? No, she said emphatically. Sassy phoned me and told me about your conversation with Doogie. How the hell can we get involved with people who call themselves Sassy and Doogie? They sound like cartoon characters. Anyway, since you two are now BFFs, what did she have to say? She said, and I quote, brilliant. Siobhan's laugh was contagious. I was really pleased that she and Doogie's intended were good friends. It was also good to see her spread her net a little further. The combined good humor of the couple was irresistible, and that's what I enjoyed the most. So Sassy approves of Doogie's strategy then, does she? Of course. When you endorsed it, Doogie knew he was on the right track. Geez, don't tell me he's taking marketing advice from me? Not as such, but Sassy says his motto is no good idea should go unstolen. That brought a laugh from me, even knowing I'd heard it more than once before. Well, you're getting me off to a good start this morning, young lady. Let's have a look at our schedule, then we can talk about our special project. By noon hour, we had sketched out a task list for the Chinese project as it was tentatively titled. A quick phone call to Doogie reminded him that this was to be top secret. We didn't want anyone stealing his thunder. He would be making the presentation and I would be backing him up. I was pumped with the idea that we could come up with something positive to present at the planning meeting. We had less than 3 months to put a proper presentation together. That was almost no time at all considering everything that had to be done beforehand. I made an appointment with the Chinese trade consulate to discuss technical manufacturing opportunities, and you would have thought I was offering to let them by the province. To say they jumped on it would be an understatement. The next day I had an appointment, and when I arrived I was treated like a dignitary, not an ordinary vice president. The meeting consisted of me and 4 officials of the consulate. The guy who was the spokesman for the group, Chung Yi, spoke flawless English, and that was a relief. We didn't have to go through the laborious process of using a translator. They were very formal, offering tea as we sat around an octagonal table. How can we help you, Mr. Moore? Chung Yi asked without preamble. My company is examining the possibility of working with another firm to produce precision parts for our equipment. Companies in your country make similar machines, but as yet they have had little success in North America. It was our thought that by combining our marketing strengths with your manufacturing, we could help one or more of your companies to obtain business through our firm without having to enter the market cold. He nodded his understanding. The only considerations, I continued, would be the ability of Chinese manufacturers to meet very demanding specifications, deliver product in a timely manner, and, of course, be competitively priced. Those are not insurmountable objectives, Mr. Moore. Our manufacturing sector is constantly renewing itself to meet the new worldwide standards of quality. We have already established our capability to meet volume and timing demands in other areas of the market. Of course, our competitive pricing is also well known. I was hoping that you could help us identify appropriate suppliers that we could visit and interview to find their interest. Of course. That is exactly why we are here today, he smiled. First, we will need to know what types of items you wish manufactured and in what volumes. Secondly, we will need to know if there are any proprietary items that you would need protected. The days of piracy have harmed our reputation in the electronics business, and we are dedicated to building secure partnerships that are free from that danger. That's very good to know and a relief as well. I will confess that is a concern. Again, he nodded. I've brought some drawings and specifications with me, I said, passing a folder and 2 memory sticks to him. They are generic and nothing is proprietary, so feel free to distribute them as you see fit. I hope it would help you in finding potential partners. You have come well prepared, and that is a good sign. With your permission, we will forward these documents to our Beijing office. I would expect some replies within a month, no more. Will that be soon enough? I smiled. It will. Thank you for seeing me today, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them if I can. We did some background examination of Emerald Precision Instruments after you called. You have manufacturing in Canada, the United States, and England. Will you require parts for all 3 of these plants? Yes. The specifications will differ for our European customers, but this project is designed to supply all 3 plants. The reputation of your company is quite good. Quality appears to be a significant factor in your success. It will mean we will have to be very selective in choosing potential partners for you. I'm glad you recognize that. You're quite right. We charge more for our products in some cases, but our customers have an expectation of quality that we rely on. For all intents and purposes, the meeting was over. The other 3 men hadn't uttered a word to me, Mr. Chung, or among themselves. They had sat silently but alertly. I wondered if they'd understood a word we'd said until I noticed a very small earpiece in one of the men's ears. A hidden translator? I left the consulate with a hopeful feeling. They seemed to understand our needs and were clearly interested in furthering our request. I just hoped they genuinely understood the need for quality and consistency. How did it go? Siobhan asked immediately as I returned to the office late that morning. As well as could be expected. Let's you and I get together with Doogie for lunch, and I'll go over what was said. We met Doogie at our usual lounge restaurant. It was usually quiet and lightly populated on a Tuesday, and today was no exception. Well, Doogie, we've got the ball rolling. The Chinese are definitely interested and will get back to us within the month with some candidates for us to review. Crikey, Carter. You don't muck about, do you? He grinned. We don't have a lot of time. Just throwing it out as an idea won't work. We've got to have as many facts and figures as we can get to grab their attention. Right, he said quickly. I could sense his enthusiasm and a touch of excitement about what he was now considering his project. What happens when we get that list? Siobhan asked. I had a feeling she already knew the answer to that question. Then I will have to go to China and decide who among them is best qualified to meet our specs. Can you do that on your own? Doogie asked. I can, but I won't. Wyatt and Johnson need to know the reason. It might cause some upset with Wyatt, but I'm hoping he can see the wisdom of it. The more I think about it, the more I believe this is the best way to protect ourselves. Good luck with that, Doogie said, looking a bit less optimistic. I'm counting on Johnson to be my principal sponsor for this project. He's got the most to gain or lose if we just let the status quo remain in place. If I know Johnson, I think he'll let me put this together with you and see what comes out of it. It isn't a hell of a lot of money to spend for something this important. I think he'll see that. I could see Siobhan nodding her agreement, and I caught a more positive look on Doogie's face as well. Of course, I'll need you there as well, Doogie. After all, it is your idea, and you are the guy that's going to make the presentation. I almost laughed at the look on his face. Siobhan did, in fact, snicker briefly. It had taken only 3 days to wangle a meeting with Wyatt and Johnson. I had fended off Wyatt's questioning about what the specifics of the meeting were by promising him it wouldn't embarrass him and it would be integral to our planning process. The last thing I needed was his second-guessing the strategy before it was even presented. He reluctantly agreed and set the meeting up for Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock. Not the ideal time, I thought, but I'd take what I could get. Doogie was visibly nervous as we walked down the hall to Johnson Saunders' office. We'd both been there before, but not together and not for something as major as this shift in policy we planned to propose. I had thought about including Siobhan, but decided not to on the basis that it was an informal preliminary proposal and the formal part would come later. There was a tendency to underestimate Doug Cruikshank at Emerald. Perhaps it was his ever-upbeat personality, or his quirky English vocabulary, or something else altogether. A number of my peers didn't understand what he contributed to the operation and dismissed him as a bit of a flake. I knew better. He was bright, well-educated, and crafty. When I thought about it, I realized I had been set up by him on this project. He had barely returned from his Montreal trip when he dropped his "oh, by the way" comment about the conversation with his seatmate on the plane. He'd had some time to think about the concept and probably discussed with others outside our organization to see if there were any flaws in the strategy. The seemingly innocent conversation between Sassy and Siobhan was not accidental either. He wanted an ally and knew my PA was the best route to me. No, I'd been set up, but I didn't mind at all. It wasn't like it was an original idea. I'd thought about going offshore for components, but I was looking in the opposite direction. I had been thinking of the Czech Republic or Latvia as possibilities. I had already discounted Germany, Italy, and Spain. Either the economy was too risky or the costs were prohibitive. In the end, that's what stalled the concept for me. The Czechs and Latvians were too costly to make it work. Japan made no sense for the same reason. Besides, they were already farming out their work all over the world. I had almost decided to investigate the options in Korea when Doogie mentioned China. Korea could be my fallback position. There was no doubt we could find a suitable manufacturer, but Korean costs were rising as well and were beginning to rival Japanese. No, China looked like the best bet for now. Johnson, Doug came to me with a concept that I thought was worth investigating. Our concerns about offshore competition, particularly Chinese, are becoming realized. They aren't there yet with their quality or technology, but they are catching up fast. We're really vulnerable to them if we don't do something that will head them off. I know we've talked a number of times about cost cutting, but your mandate from the shareholders is to grow the business. We won't do that by shrinking. We need a strategy that will not only protect us from competitors, but will allow us to expand our markets. Doug and I have begun to look at an alternative plan that may bring us what we want. I'd like him to tell you about it. I saw Johnson and Wyatt's attention swing immediately to Doogie. If he was nervous, he hid it masterfully. He began by telling them about the conversation he had with the executive on the plane, and then the conversations he and I had discussing the possibilities and our options. I could see Wyatt squirming in his seat, about to pounce. I thought. He didn't, and I wondered if it was because Johnson was paying rapt attention to Doogie. When he was finished his preliminary comments, Doogie turned it over to me. On my own hook, I've had a meeting with the Chinese Trade Consul to explore the possibilities of a supply or joint venture option, I said, thinking this might bring about the end of the meeting. I saw Wyatt's eyes grow big again, but Johnson was completely absorbed in my remarks. Again, Wyatt apparently thought better of interrupting, but he was visibly uncomfortable now. They have agreed to provide us with a list of potential suppliers based on some generic specifications that I've supplied them with. What? Wyatt exploded. Do you mean to tell me you provided them with our specifications? How the hell could you be so stupid? He was really hot now. I gave them only generic items that several of our competitors use. Nothing proprietary was offered. Our name was not on the specs or the drawings, so they have no way to know the source. This is crazy. This is playing right into the enemy's hand. Wyatt shot back, looking daggers at me. Cool down, Wyatt, Johnson said calmly. If Carter is right, they don't have anything that they can use against us. Why did you give them that, Carter? I needed some cost information to go with the supply details. We need to know that the savings are enough to justify the effort to use an offshore supplier. Johnson was nodding. Makes sense, he said, not looking at Wyatt. What's next? They've indicated they'll get back to me by the end of the month with their list. At that point, I'd recommend I go to China to look at the various possible suppliers to see what kind of facilities they have. I want to be sure they can do what we need them to do. I'm not in favor of this, Johnson, Wyatt said, still red-faced from his earlier explosion. With all due respect, Wyatt, I said before Johnson could respond, I see this as the only likely option to head off what could be a disastrous competitive situation in the next 2 or 3 years. Doing nothing is not an option. Shrinking the business down by cutting operations will, at best, only hold the line temporarily, and it will inhibit growth. If we want this business to not only survive, but thrive, we need to think beyond traditional boundaries. You're absolutely right, Carter, Johnson said. But it also begs the question, how quickly can we make this happen? I don't know that. A year, I would guess. Part of my reason to go to China is to find the answers to those questions. Have you budgeted for this trip? Wyatt asked, knowing full well I hadn't. No, I admitted, but I don't think an investment of a few $1,000s is too much to find out if this is a solution to our concerns. Johnson was nodding again. I was sure now he was on side with the proposal. Wyatt, however, was another matter. He was angry that I had essentially shown him up. It wouldn't make me his favorite employee anymore. But then again, he wasn't my favorite boss. Doogie has sat quietly watching this little drama as it played out. Gone was the perpetual smile and happy-go-lucky demeanor. He was worried, particularly about Wyatt. Bugger me, Carter. Your boss looked like he was about to spit nails there for a bit. Yeah, I didn't do myself any favors in there today. On the other hand, I really believe this is our only likely chance to hold off the competition. Wyatt isn't a risk taker. Never has been. Never will be. How many times have we gone over the consolidation plan in the last 3 years? It's the same story over and over again. It won't work for more than a year or two. Then we'll be right back where we are now and nothing to show for it. Your presentation said it all. It's our only clear road to growth, not to mention survival. We walked into my office, and immediately Siobhan was up and following us in. Well? She asked, looking at both of us. Approved, I smiled. She clapped her hands together and let out a small hooray. Cripes girl, you should have seen your boss. I reckon old Hendricks is having 6 kinds of fits right now. He was all set to shoot Carter down and Carter kept coming back with guns a-blazing. Johnson was siding with Carter, so Wyatt was right narked that this wasn't going his way. Siobhan had her hand over her mouth and a look of horror mixed with surprise about her. Oh, Carter, I hope Wyatt doesn't punish you for this. You took a terrible chance with him. Had to be done. Once I realized I believed in the concept, it had to be done. You're a braver man than I am. Gunga Din, Doogie chuckled ruefully. It wasn't 20 minutes before Wyatt called me into his office. I was ready for an unpleasant session and steeled myself before I approached Donna. He's in a nasty mood, Carter. Be careful in there, she warned. Thanks. I'll survive it, I said, hoping in fact I would. I walked into Wyatt's office. He looked up at me and motioned me to sit in front of him. He ignored me for a few moments, and I looked at him carefully. He was a fairly tall man, over 6 feet, a wiry frame with a shock of gray hair and a florid, rugged complexion. I seldom saw him smile, and when he did, it seemed forced and never in his eyes. I doubted I would be seeing a smile from him at this meeting. I thought we had an understanding you wouldn't embarrass me, Carter, he snapped after looking up at me. I'm not very pleased with your stunt this morning. What do you have to say for yourself? He snarled, leaning back in his thick leather chair. I was there to support an idea of Doug Cruikshank's that I thought had merit. The actions I took cost nothing and may lead to something important to this company. I don't call a junket to China nothing. As far as the Chinese go, I don't trust them. They'll steal the gold out of your teeth if you let them. And I'm damned upset that you've given them our specifications and drawings. You had no right to do that without my permission. Would you have given it? I asked without thinking that I was challenging him. Hell, no. Let the scumbsuckers figure it out for themselves. But it's too late now, isn't it? You've already done it. Let me tell you more. You haven't done anything to enhance your reputation today. I'm not going to sit back and let you do whatever you please just because it suits you. From now on, if you want something, you come and see me first. I'm not going to be ambushed by you in Saunders' office again. Got it? Yes, sir, I said, wishing I hadn't. Go on, get out. I've seen enough of you today, he growled. Well, that was fun, I thought as I left. Donna looked up at me and gave me a rueful smile with a shake of her head. She'd probably heard the whole exchange. I didn't mind. She wasn't a gossip and was clearly in my camp. She was exactly the kind of executive secretary anyone would want. As promised, the Chinese got back to us at the end of the month. I met with Chung-Yi briefly to pick up the list, but he had a surprise for me. Our Ministry of Industry has supplied a list of possible manufacturers that can meet your needs. I have had them listed in order of most favorable. Our ministry would be pleased to supply you with a translator and transportation to the factories of your choice. You will be guests of the People's Republic while you are there. Oh, well, thank you. I didn't expect that. That's very generous of you. Please thank the ministry for me. You are welcome. We are pleased that you will consider our manufacturers as an important supplier to your company. Do you know when you will be able to travel? No, not yet, but I will decide in a day or two and let you know when I can be available. The sooner the better if that isn't inconvenient for you. He smiled, as he had several times during our discussions. Excellent. I look forward to hearing from you. Also, we have a reception for a number of Canadian companies doing business in China. I would like to offer you an invitation to attend. I'd like that very much. When is it? 2 weeks from Wednesday at 5 in the afternoon. Would it be possible for your president to attend? Mr. Johnson Saunders is the chief executive officer of Emerald, I said with a grin. I would be very pleased if you sent him an invitation. He is very interested in my project. Excellent, he smiled broadly. We will look forward to seeing you then. Thank you, Mr. Chung. I'll let you know about the timing of the trip soon. I bowed the traditional bow and left his office. This time, there was just Chung-Yi in attendance. The other men were nowhere to be seen. As I walked back to our office, I thought an invitation to Johnson Saunders would be a way for the two of us to meet some people already doing business in China. It would give us some contacts that could be exploited to see what pitfalls or problems might arise. It seemed like good insurance. If they sent an invitation to Wyatt Hendricks, I was sure it would end up in the round file. No matter. Johnson was the man who counted. I already knew I wanted to go to China before mid-October at the latest. That would at least give me a month on my return to put the numbers together and see if our project made economic sense. You'll be in charge while I'm away, Siobhan. I'll keep in touch with you and Doogie to let you know how I'm doing. I'll also keep Wyatt informed by email, but I'll send you a blind copy. Keep them in a separate file, just in case. Just in case what? She asked with a worried frown. Not sure. Anyway, the more we have in writing, the better I'll feel. You don't trust him, do you? I hate to admit it, but no, I don't. He's pissed off at me for pulling this off, and he doesn't want to do it in the first place. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't try and undermine this project. I don't like being in this position, but now that I've started the ball rolling, I've got to stick with it. It may be a fatal mistake, but at least it will be my mistake. The look on Siobhan's face was one of worry, and I hated to see that. She had become very important to me, and I was finding myself being very protective of her. I was fighting with myself to deny that it was more than a workplace relationship. I was having more and more difficulty believing it. I was really pleased when Johnson accepted the invitation to the Chinese consul's reception. It was my chance to introduce him to Cheng Yi and have him interact with several of his contemporaries who were already doing business in China. He stayed much longer than I expected and was involved in a number of different conversations, as was I. I learned a lot that evening. The next morning my phone rang not long after I had arrived. It was before the switchboard opened, so I was sure it was an internal call. Hello? Good morning, Carter. I just wanted to call and let you know how valuable that reception was for me last evening. Thank you for arranging the invitation. You're welcome, Johnson. I'm glad you got something out of it. Yes, I did. When are you planning to go to China? He asked. The first week of October, if that can be arranged. Cheng Yi will let me know in a day or two. Good. The sooner the better. I think you've got something important on your plate. The people I talked to last night put to rest some of my concerns about dealing with the Chinese. I'm sure you were hearing the same things as well. Yes, I was. I just hope I can find one or two suppliers that we can rely on. I've done the preliminaries on their costs, and they look very favorable. I thought they would. Oh, and let's just keep this conversation between the two of us for now. Yes, of course. I don't think Wyatt's particularly thrilled with my plan, but as long as you approve, I'll go ahead. You have that approval. Try not to step on him too hard, Carter. He's been around a long time, and change is very difficult for him. That's just his nature. Yes, I understand. I'm just glad it isn't your nature, sir. He laughed. Good luck in China, Carter. Siobhan and Doogie met me at the airport arrivals area when I returned from my 2 weeks in China. It had been a long and tiring flight, but I was elated with what I had seen and had said so to both of them by phone and email. My emails to Wyatt had been positive, not to upset him but to settle him. I had briefly considered sending blind emails to Johnson, but thought better of it. No need to give him the impression I didn't respect my boss, even if that was the case. How are you, Carter? Siobhan said as she greeted me with an unexpected hug. I'm fine. Tired, of course. Doogie, Siobhan, I think we've got a winner. Let's go home and get a good night's sleep. We'll meet tomorrow morning, and I'll go over everything I've got. We walked out arm in arm. I was on a delayed high with the success of my trip. I had not only found at least 2 viable suppliers, but I had seen some amazing plants that I didn't expect to see. The image of a backward nation trying to enter the 21st century was dispelled almost immediately. The plants I saw were state-of-the-art and fully capable of producing the quality and quantity we needed. Doogie drove and I sat in the back seat, talking incessantly about what I'd seen and how impressed I was with the new Chinese economy. My enthusiasm was contagious as Siobhan and Doogie both asked many questions about what I saw and where I went. I was operating on adrenaline at that point and could feel that it was about to run out. When Doogie arrived at my apartment building, I was grateful that he and Siobhan helped carry my bags up to my apartment. I thanked them very much, pleading fatigue for not offering them a drink. I would see them in the morning, but perhaps not too early. I really needed a good night's sleep to begin to counteract the jet lag. Strangely, I was up at my usual time, but decided to forego the exercise room. My energy level was down, and I didn't want to make myself ill from exhaustion. I was going to have to pace myself for a day or two to get back on local time. I arrived at the office only a few minutes later than my usual time, and wasn't surprised to find Siobhan already at her desk looking her usually bright and lovely self. I had become so used to her being there that I took it for granted. I shouldn't have, but I did. Carter Moore, what are you doing in this early? She demanded. You're at least a half day out of sync. I slept on the plane, I fibbed. Did you? That would be a first. She'd been on enough flights with me to know that I didn't sleep on planes. Well, I dozed. She gave me a look of disbelief, then gave up the argument. I know Wyatt will want to see you this morning. Are you ready for that? I suppose. I kept him informed by email, so there won't be any surprises. Actually, some of his replies seem to indicate he is softening his approach. Maybe I'm winning him over to our side. I sure hope so, she said seriously. You've put everything on the line for this project. I don't think I could handle it if we failed. I have no intention of failing. My trip was better than I expected, as I told you last night. I've taken some pictures of the plants I was in, and I'll use them to make my case with Wyatt. I'm just wondering if Johnson will want to report too. I hope so. He's on your side from what you've told me. I hope your report reassures him. I looked at her with fondness. She was a spirited young woman who, without doubt, was on my team. Her loyalty was unquestioned, and I felt her full abilities were still untapped. I remembered her comments when I first interviewed her. She saw her job as a stepping stone to an executive position at Emerald. In my mind, she had already established her credentials. Dougie arrived shortly afterwards, and we shared a coffee as I filled them in on my trip. I had downloaded my pictures onto my laptop and used the endless hours on the flight from Beijing to label them before I was unable to remember one plant from another. I took the usual sightseeing pictures, of course, but I kept them separate. I wish you guys could have been there, I said as we worked our way through the images. It would have knocked your socks off to see how modern and sophisticated these plants were. I was told to expect them, but until I saw them with my own eyes, I wasn't ready for just how far they'd come. As I flipped through the pictures on my large desktop monitor, I could see Dougie becoming more and more confident in our strategy. I could almost hear him working on his sales pitch to the troops next month. I was sure he'd have them up for the game. True to form, Wyatt called and asked me to meet with him at 10 o'clock to review my trip. I downloaded my pictures into 2 memory sticks, one for Wyatt and one for Johnson when I got the opportunity to pass it along. So, how's the jet lag? My boss asked affably. They're all right. I won't be staying up late tonight, but I should be back to normal in a couple of days. Good. Your email said you were pleased with what you saw and that you took some pictures. I'd like to see them. Right here, I said, passing the memory stick to him. He plugged it into his desktop immediately and brought them up. I had labeled them for easy identification, and they were in date order from the beginning of the trip. He didn't say anything as he began to scroll through them, but the look on his face showed surprise. This wasn't what he was expecting to see. The 2 plants I was most impressed with were in Zhengzhou and Huainan. They aren't far apart and have good rail and road access. Huainan isn't a big city, but it's growing very rapidly. Zhengzhou is much bigger and well-established, but it too is growing. I talked to a couple of regular travelers to China, and they say that every time they go to Shanghai or any of the other big cities, there are new buildings that weren't there a year ago. The growth is amazing. Wyatt was nodding, fascinated with my pictures. I had taken some close-ups of equipment with my guide's permission, and I could see he was impressed with the sophistication and complexity of the equipment. All of it was Chinese-developed and built. As he finished going through the pictures, he leaned back in his chair. You're convinced these people can do what we need done? He asked sternly. Yes. I've seen enough and talked to enough North American businessmen to convince myself that they have the equipment and skills to give us what we want. You realize it's your neck on the line, don't you? I won't be able to save you if you're wrong. I nodded. I didn't have any illusions about Wyatt going to the wall for me. Well, I'm still not sold, but apparently Johnson is. I assume he's going to want to see these pictures and talk to you, so I'll let him know you're back. Thanks. I'll be available, I said, rising and getting ready to leave. Is Cruikshank going to be ready to make this presentation at the planning meeting? Yes. We'll be working on it over the next 3 weeks. I should have some better numbers before we present our plan. Very well. I want to see the numbers and the outline before you present it. I don't want any surprises. Understood. I agreed and left his office. Well, I didn't have his ringing endorsement, but at least it wasn't as negative as the last go-around. How'd it go? Siobhan asked immediately as I returned. Not bad. Better than I expected. In fact, good. You didn't need a battle right now. You look exhausted still. Why don't you lock yourself in the office and take a nap? I'll hold off the dogs until noon, she said softly. I sighed. It was a good and sensible idea. Yes, Mother, I agreed. I walked in, closed the door, and slumped on the leather sofa. Leaning back, I closed my eyes, and as the movie title said, I was gone in 60 seconds. 2 hours of sleep did me some good, but I was a bit groggy when Siobhan gently prodded me awake just before 1 o'clock. She put a tray with a sandwich, a carton of milk, and a large chocolate chip cookie in front of me on the coffee table. Thank you. What's on our schedule this afternoon? Nothing. When you finish your lunch, go home, go to bed, and don't come back here until tomorrow, she said in a no-nonsense voice. I looked up at her with affection. Yes, mother. I got a nice smile as she turned to leave. I ate my sandwich, drank the milk, stuck the wrapped cookie in my jacket pocket, grabbed my briefcase and coat, and left the building. Mother knows best. I needed another ally in my quest to sell the Chinese project to our people. I was confident that Johnson was on my side, and even Wyatt had ceased his criticisms for a while. But, like any other corporation, there was an inescapable component that I needed to include. The money man. In this case, it was the money lady, one Linda Powell, CFO. I'm quite cross with you, Carter, she said sternly after I'd sketched out the strategy and where we were at. You've given me very little time to do what's necessary for the planning meeting. I was concerned for a moment, but then could see that while her words were sharp, the look in her eyes was anything but. However, it's nice to see someone come to me with a plan that will push this company forward instead of retreating into a shell. I nodded and smiled. We were on the same page almost immediately. I've got some more numbers coming this week on landed costs of specific items, I said, so we could slot them into our existing cost models and see what they give us. Yes, as long as there aren't any unknown costs to be considered. Such as? Shipment delays, shortages, dock strikes, she said, shrugging. They're giving us pretty strong assurances that they won't have any problem meeting our needs within our schedules. In talking to some of their customers, they are telling us it isn't a problem. As far as a dock strike goes, they just divert to Seattle and truck the containers up here. Good. You've at least thought about problems like that. Now, what do you want from me besides updated costs? I was thinking maybe a side-by-side comparison of finished costs to show what it would mean to the salespeople. They're the ones who have to sell our products. They'll tell us quickly enough if we're on the right track. Yes, that's easy enough to do, she said, thinking about something else I suspected. What about growth? What would be possible if you had a market advantage for, say, a year or two? I'm not sure. That's a question for Doug Cruikshank. I'm just an operations guy, I shrugged. You're a little more than that, Carter. Tell Doogie. That's his nickname, isn't it? Tell him I want to talk to him about that and ask him to come prepared. I want to give him some tools to do a real selling job on this project. Thank you, Linda. I really appreciate your jumping on board. Next time, come and see me sooner. I hate to get all my development information from Johnson, she smirked. I was surprised, but I shouldn't have been. How long have you known? The day you met with Johnson and Wyatt. Johnson was sure you'd need some hard numbers to work with. I've been waiting for you. Mark it up to a stupid rookie mistake, Linda. I should have included you from the very beginning, and I won't make that mistake again. You're forgiven? Provided you get those numbers this week, she smiled. I felt relieved and yet chastened by this woman. She was in her 50s, married almost 30 years to a successful artist, Darren Powell. Like her, he was brilliant at his chosen craft, extremely well-read, possessed of a lively sense of humor, and he loved his spouse passionately. They seemed on the surface to be opposites, but they were anything but. I kicked myself once more for not including her right from the start. Thankfully, Johnson had covered for me. So how did your meeting with Linda go? I asked Doogie as he plunked himself down in front of my desk. It was a bomb, he grinned. Clary nearly shit himself when Linda gave him the projected earnings from sales growth. I'd been around Doogie long enough to know that a bomb was good. Clary was Clarence Woolfolk, our marketing VP. Clary's been nattering at me for weeks to give him the skinny on this plan. I've held him off until now, but you can put him in the sold column as far as I'm concerned. Well done, Doogie. I think that puts us well on the road to being ready. How are you coming with your presentation? Bloody good until Linda threw that projected profit spanner in the works. I've got some more work to do now. Not that I mind, he grinned. This is going to be a very different planning meeting from the ones I've been at in the past few years, I observed. I just hope our people get as excited about it as we are. Too right, he nodded. Well, young lady, are you ready for this? I asked as we walked down the hotel corridor to our meeting room. Siobhan smiled at me and nodded. I'm really looking forward to this, Carter. All the work you and Doogie have done to spring this on the people has to be worth it. Well, you were right there with me every step of the way. You know everything that I know, so if I stumble or lose the plot, I'll look to you to rescue me. Okay, I'll try and be prepared, she promised. The morning session of the meeting ground through the numbers for the year-to-date and the year-end projections. I was only barely paying attention except for our numbers from operations. I had asked Siobhan to present the distribution numbers while I looked after the manufacturing numbers. I wanted to get her better known among the troops, and I also wanted to see how she handled herself in front of an audience. I had no need to worry. Well done, I whispered as she returned to her seat. She nodded her thank you and looked pleased. She had got through it without a hiccup and had handled a number of questions from the audience with ease. I was proud of her. The lunch break signaled the end of the current year review. After lunch, we would begin the plan for the next year. In talking to Wyatt, Clary, and Johnson, who chaired the meeting, we thought it best to present the Chinese project after the afternoon break. I was pretty sure that would wake the audience up and get their full attention. Only a handful of people knew about our strategy, but after lunch a couple of those people, Linda, Clary, and Johnson, couldn't resist hinting that we had something in the wings that would change their thinking. I could hear some of the murmurings as these little tidbits were dropped, but I didn't think anyone had guessed what we planned. It was just 3:15 that afternoon when Doogie stood in front of the assembly and turned on his laptop projector. The first slide read the Chinese solution in Chinese-style typeface and had the background of an illustration of a traditionally dressed Chinese man bowing toward the audience. Doogie just couldn't resist, but he had everyone's attention. Doogie stood up there for the next hour and just blew the audience away. When he was done, there was dead silence for a few moments until the sales manager from Chicago stood up and began to applaud. Within seconds, that was followed by several other sales managers and people joining the applause until by the time it took to stand, the entire audience was applauding. Doogie stood there transfixed. He had no idea how to react. Oh, he was happy all right, but he stood frozen in place while all the applause was going on. It took a while for it to die down. I thought he would walk off at that point, but he didn't. I'm sure you lot think this is all my doing, he said, with a serious gaze out over the group. Well, it ain't. I might have mentioned it to someone, and then that someone mentioned it to someone else, and the next thing you know, here I am. Carter Moore is the reason this has happened. He, and his boss Wyatt, and Johnson, and Linda, and Siobhan Mulcahy, and Clary have all made it work. But it was Carter who grabbed the idea and took off with it. I was just lucky enough to be the bloke that gave you the good news, he smiled. I'm glad you liked what you heard. That's plenty good enough for me. Thanks, he finished and walked away from the podium. For all intents and purposes, that ended the meeting. There were some wrap-up comments from Johnson, but it was past 5 before the now enthusiastic sales staff would let Doogie, Clary, or me go. We were bombarded with questions, most of them relating to when they would see the results in the field. We stuck to our original answers that it would be a year in the making, but it would be worth the wait. I could see the impatient looks on their faces, but thankful ones as well. There was a wrap-up dinner planned for 7 o'clock, and I debated going home and changing, but decided against it. We had arranged a hospitality suite upstairs in the hotel, and I decided I should make an appearance. Siobhan went home to change, and Doogie went home to pick up Sassy. She had been invited along with some of the other executive wives. Wyatt's wife Marion, Johnson's Gwen, Clary's Jeanette, and Linda's Darren would be joined by Siobhan and me. I stood in the hospitality suite listening to the now noisy group talk. I heard the excitement and anticipation of the group, and that was really heartening. We had energized our people with our plan, and it was a shot in the arm for me, and I know it was for Doogie as well. This was my 7th or 8th meeting of this kind. I couldn't remember which, but my first as vice president. I had been uptight knowing what was at stake, and now I was coming down from that. I warned myself not to get too far into the scotch. It wouldn't do to get drunk right now, no matter how much the idea might have appealed to me. I wasn't much of a drinker to start with, and I knew my limit. I was half listening to a conversation between 2 salesmen when they turned to me. Do you have any idea how important that one thing is to us? He asked. I wasn't sure exactly what he was referring to, but I assumed it was Doogie's plan. We needed something to grow with, and yes, we know how important it is, I smiled. No, I mean having everyone on board with it. It's the first time I can remember that everyone was solid with the strategy. I mean Saunders, Hendricks, Clary, you, Powell, the whole works. Man, that felt good. It hadn't occurred to me how that resonated with the staff people, but now I knew. It wasn't just the Chinese solution. It was the idea that everyone from top to bottom was marching in the same direction. When I thought about it, he was right. It was something to savor and remember. It may have been an unplanned side effect, but it was an important one. I wondered how many others realized it. Siobhan arrived just before we were to go down to dinner and declined a glass of wine. There would be some at the table, she said. It would have been a tight fit around our table, but Wyatt's wife was a no-show. Apparently not feeling well, he said. Everyone else was feeling just fine, it seemed. I had met them all before, but it was always nice to see Gwen Saunders and Darren Powell. They were 2 of my favorite people. We were sitting closely together, and as the dessert plates were removed and coffee was offered, I leaned back in my chair and relaxed. Johnson and Gwyn were circulating among the group, acknowledging all the visitors from near and far. Doogie and Sassy were holding court at the Manchester table, renewing old acquaintances. Wyatt had disappeared, and I wouldn't have been surprised if he had left since his wife wasn't there. He'd had more than a couple of drinks, I noticed. I'm not sure what prompted it, but I did something completely unexpected. Siobhan was sitting with her hands in her lap, talking to Linda and Darren. To this day, I don't know what came over me, but I put my right hand on her left and squeezed it gently. When I realized what I had done, I almost jerked it away in alarm, but before I could act, she put her left hand on top of mine and gave it a gentle squeeze as well. She was still talking with the Powells and hadn't reacted when I touched her. It was as if it was an everyday occurrence that she expected. I couldn't very well pull my hand away, even though it was hidden beneath the tablecloth. The truth was, I didn't want to. I sat, turned slightly toward the other three, and listened to the conversation, all the while with my hand captured by hers on her thigh. When Siobhan shifted in her seat and removed her hand from mine, I took the opportunity to withdraw and hope I hadn't offended her. I didn't think anyone had seen the little drama, but Siobhan certainly was aware. When Johnson and Gwyn returned to the table, the conversation switched, and neither she nor I were involved in it. It wasn't a minute later than I felt her hand on mine again, this time on my thigh. It was such a gentle touch that it was no difficulty to turn my hand over and clasp hers. I squeezed it softly, and she returned the gesture. I couldn't blame it on the liquor. I'd had one scotch before dinner and one glass of wine during the meal. I didn't have any excuse. What part of me was thinking it was okay for me to violate one of my hard and fast rules? I didn't get involved with women at the office. But tonight, I'd stepped over the line. Why? The party was starting to break up. Some of the people were heading back to the hospitality suite, and some were on their way home. I looked at Siobhan and saw something that told me where we were going. Her eyes were shining, and she was smiling, and I was lost. Right then and there, I was lost. I rose, still holding her hand, said our goodnights, and walked out of the room, still holding her hand. This time, I didn't give a damn who noticed. There was a cab stand in front of the hotel, and luckily there were a couple of unoccupied units. I held the door for Siobhan and slid in behind her. I was about to give the driver her address when she gave him mine. Are you sure? I asked, not positive I knew what I was asking. Very sure. She smiled, that special look in her eyes still there. I didn't know how to interpret that look then, but I do now. I paid the driver when we arrived at my building, and I helped her out of the car, holding the door for her as we entered the lobby. There hadn't been a word said beyond my question and her answer in the cab. We rode the elevator to the 9th floor, and again I held the door for her as she walked into my apartment. I helped her with her coat, and after hanging it up I turned back to her only to find her standing right in front of me. It was that look again. It was searching, almost pleading. I bent my head slightly and kissed her softly on her lips. I drew back, saw her eyebrows rise, and I kissed her again. This time her arms went around me and held me tightly. This one wasn't going to end so soon. We stood there in each other's embrace for several minutes, kissing and holding each other, but not saying anything. I had no idea what to do next until Siobhan spoke. Do you have any idea how long I've wanted to do this? Do what? I asked like a dummy. Hold you, kiss you, have you make love to me. Tell me how long, I said softly. Since the day you went to Wyatt's office and yelled at him about making me cry. Oh, that. I thought it might be something more romantic than that, I kidded. Nothing is more romantic than a man risking everything to protect his woman. What makes you think you were my woman then? Your eyes. The way you looked at me. The way you talked to me. The way you treated me. It was very possessive, she said in a sexy murmur. I had no idea. I know. That's what nearly drove me crazy. I was falling in love with you, and I couldn't get you to respond. I'm not supposed to fall in love with my staff. Says who? Says me. It's one of my rules. Well, your rules are out the window now, Carter Moore. Now that I've finally got you to admit you love me, I'm not letting you go. Who said I was in love with you? I teased. You did. You did it every way except with words. You are taking an awful lot for granted, Ms. Mulcahy. I wasn't trying to torture her, but I wanted everything out in the open. Tell me you don't love me, she challenged. No, I won't. I can't, I grinned. She flew into my arms once more. This time there were tears, and I began to think I might have pushed her a bit too far. I love you, Siobhan Mulcahy. I'm breaking every rule I ever had about office romances only because I love you, I said, looking at her as the tears continued to trickle down her lovely cheeks. She buried her face in my chest, nicely dampening my shirt in the process. I couldn't have cared less. I had finally admitted to myself that I was in love for the first time in my life. If someone had asked me yesterday if I'd ever been in love, I'd have told them sure, a few years ago. Now I knew that I was wrong. This was the first time, and it was the only one that counted. As much as I had fantasized about what she would look like naked, my imagination was no match for the reality. She was amazing. Her 5'0" height was composed of every flawless female curve that an artist could conceive. Vargas would have spent hours trying to recreate her perfection. Now, I was using my hands, my fingers, my lips and tongue to trace everything. We were perfect together. I'm sure every guy says that about his woman, but I don't think they could ever find two people more compatible than we were. We made love twice before we succumbed to fatigue and fell asleep in each other's arms. I awoke once in the middle of the night to find her curled up to me, holding me closely to her and snoring softly. I'd forgotten how peaceful and wonderful that felt. I was asleep again soon afterward. When I awoke Saturday morning, our positions had been reversed. I was tucked up behind her, my arm around her. "Good morning, lover," she mumbled. "Good morning to you," I replied, kissing her forehead as she burrowed further into me. Mostly, I chuckled. Was that mean? She really wasn't fully awake yet. "I need to use the bathroom first. I'll be right back." Don't be long." When I returned, she was sound asleep once more. Considering she was an early riser, I made the assumption that she was coming down from a great deal of tension and really needed her sleep. I watched her for a few moments as she lay there, beautiful in every way a woman can be. I stepped quietly to my closet and took out a robe before heading for the kitchen, closing the bedroom door behind me. I drank some orange juice, made a pot of coffee, had a banana, and sat in my favorite chair in the living room. Saturday in Vancouver on a rainy November morning wasn't my favorite scene. It was still quite dark at 8 o'clock thanks to the low cloud and a late rising sun. I could still see English Bay, but the mountains were hidden by those clouds. This particular Saturday morning was different. The gloom didn't get to me. It couldn't alter that feeling of bliss and contentment that overwhelmed me last night and again this morning. I was happier than I can ever remember, and Siobhan was the reason. I was in love, and I knew now just what it felt like. For the first time in my life, I was really alive. I put my head back and was almost dozing when the phone rang. I moved to pick it up quickly, hoping it wouldn't disturb Siobhan. "Hello," I said quietly. "Carter, it's me, Doogie." "Yes, Doogie. What are you doing up so early this morning?" "I got a call from one of my mates on the local constabulary a while ago. Wyatt Hendricks was picked up last night in a raid on some house in the East End. He was caught in possession of some restricted narcotics while he was busy buggering a rent boy at the time." "What the hell is a rent boy?" "A juvenile male prostitute," he answered with some heat. "Oh shit," I said, 1,000 things going through my mind. Oh shit is right. He'll likely be up for bail this morning, but I wonder what charges they might lay. I guess that's up to the Crown, isn't it? Yeah, you're probably right. Oh man, this isn't good, Doogie. It isn't good at all. I wonder what Marion will do? I asked, almost to myself. "He'll be lucky if she doesn't nut him," Doogie said with no humor at all. "What the hell should I do?" "You might phone Johnson and give him a heads up. He's an early bird like us." "How did you find out about this?" I asked. Like I said, I've got a mate on the VPD, ex-London copper with the Met. He saw Wyatt's business card when he took his wallet and did a search. He remembered I worked at Emerald and tipped me the wink. Wyatt's still in there as of a few minutes ago. Okay, I'll call Johnson. Thanks for letting me know, Doogie. I'll get back to you if I hear anything new. I hung up and sat there wondering what the hell Wyatt had done. Restricted narcotics and a male prostitute? What would Marion think? I punched in Johnson's home number after looking it up in my company directory. "Hello? Good morning, Johnson. It's Carter Moore." "Yes, Carter. What's up?" "I had a call from Doug Cruikshank a few minutes ago. He's been told that Wyatt Hendricks was arrested last night for possession of restricted narcotics and he was with a boy." "What? Are you sure?" "Doug's got a friend on the force, and he called him to let him know what was happening. Wyatt's in the city lockup as of a few minutes ago. There will probably be a bail hearing, but I'm not sure when." "How did this guy know to call Doug?" "They did a search and found Wyatt's business card. It matched his ID. I guess." I heard a deep sigh on the end of the phone line. "I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, Johnson, but I thought you would want to know." Yes, of course. I'll have to get in touch with our lawyers and see what they can find out. I'd better call Marion too. She'll be in quite a state, I imagine. Is there anything I can do? Or should do? I can't think of anything now, Carter. Let me talk to our lawyers, and I'll let you know if there's something that needs to be done. In the meantime, if Doug hears any more, let me know. Yes, of course. I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens then. I'm afraid you're right. But this isn't good for Wyatt or for the company. We signed off and I hung up the phone. I'd barely put it down when I felt two small arms wrap around my waist and a voluptuous body press up to my back. What was that all about? She said, now fully awake. Something I'm having a hard time believing, I said, turning to face her. I told her the story and watched her face as it registered shock and bewilderment. Are you sure that's the Wyatt Hendricks we know? Yeah, Doogie's sure. He had his business cards on him. Oh my God, she breathed, shaking her head in disbelief. I never liked the man, but I never dreamed he might be a perv. I don't think any of us did, dear. I'm as mystified as you are. Johnson is deeply shocked. He's known Wyatt the longest of any of us, and if he didn't know about his private life, then none would. What about his wife? I shook my head. I don't know what Marion will do or think. It will be devastating to her, I'm sure. We went through the motions for the rest of the morning. I heard nothing more from either Doogie or Johnson, so I assumed there was nothing to tell. I drove Siobhan to her apartment and convinced her to pick up some clothes for tomorrow and stay with me tonight. I didn't have to try very hard for her to agree. We went to Granville Island Market to do some shopping before returning to my apartment. The sky had lightened a bit, and it looked like there might be a break in the weather before too long. There were no messages on my machine when we got back, and no one had tried to call me on my cell phone. I woke up this morning feeling as good as I have ever felt in my life. I told Siobhan as I held her in my arms that afternoon. One phone call has completely messed up that mood. Does that mean you don't love me anymore? She teased. You know better than that, I grunted as I began to tickle her rib cage. Stop. I'll pee myself. She laughed as she fought me off. I stopped and pulled her into my arms and kissed her passionately. I was trying to make up for lost time. I don't know when I fell in love with her, but I knew exactly when I realized it. When I put my hand on hers last evening and didn't want to remove it, I knew. Have I told you today that I love you? No, but you can now if you want. I love you, Siobhan. I probably have for some time but needed a kick in the butt to have me realize it. What kick in the butt? Okay, it's just a metaphor. What I'm trying to say is that I've been in love with you for a while and just didn't understand it. It's all new, as it turns out. It's nothing I've ever felt before, even thought I had. Does that make sense? I think so. You thought you were in love before, but until I came along, you didn't know what love really was. That about it? Well, that sounds kind of clinical and cold, but yeah, that's about it. Okay, now that we've got that over with, what's next? She grinned. This is the part I'm definitely not going to screw up, I said carefully. This is the part where we go to the jeweler's and pick out a ring, and then I get down on one knee and propose marriage. Naturally, you say yes. You got it all backwards, Carter. First you propose. Then, if I say yes, and I do mean if, we get a ring. She was poking me with her finger as she spoke. Two can play this game, I thought. When do you think would be the most favorable time for me to propose? Anytime you want, my darling man, but don't wait too long. Someone else may come along and steal my heart away. I untangled myself from her, got down on one knee in front of her, took her hand in mine and said, My dear Siobhan, I love you with all my heart. Will you be my bride and mother of our children? I saw her eyes go wide when I mentioned children. I thought maybe I'd put my foot in it. Children? Huh, she said, recovering her composure. How many? As many as you'd like, but two at least, please, I said, getting in the spirit of things. Mulcahys are famous for large families. At least that's what I'm told, she said with an arched eyebrow. How many brothers and sisters do you have? One of each, she grinned. So that would be 3. I think 3 would be a very nice-sized family. Then it's settled. We'll marry and have 3 children. When would you like to start? She said, trying desperately to keep a straight face. I thought we already had. She slipped down off the recliner and into my arms. Yes, Carter Moore. I will marry you. I will have our children with you. We will live happily ever after. She finished with her lips now plastered tightly to mine. Ramona Leiter looked up as I approached Johnson's office. He's expecting you, she said without expression. Thanks, I said, recognizing she was aware of the seriousness of my visit. I knocked and entered, seeing the drawn look on Johnson Saunders as he sat behind his desk. He rose and gestured toward the small table off to the side with comfortable chairs surrounding it. I moved toward it and selected a seat. Thank you for coming so promptly, Carter. This is a very distressing situation. I haven't had a lot of time to think about all the ramifications that can fall from this, but here's what I know. I sat back to listen to Johnson. Wyatt was arrested on Friday evening in the company of an underage minor. He was having sex with the boy at the time. In addition, he was found to be in possession of a quantity of methamphetamine. The raid took place sometime around 1 in the morning, and he was taken directly to the Main Street station, booked, and put in a cell. He called his lawyer Saturday morning and was released on bail sometime later that morning. I talked to Marion before he arrived home, and she was beside herself. She had no idea that he was using narcotics, much less involved with young boys. I don't know what will become of their marriage, but I can't think this will do it any good. Late Saturday afternoon, he called me. He was aware that I knew of his arrest, and he had talked briefly to Marion. He offered his resignation, and I have reluctantly accepted it. He also personally apologized to me. He sounded like a broken man, Carter, and I'm not surprised. He's almost as old as I am, and I doubt he'll ever work again. At least not at the level he was at here. I was sitting back listening to Johnson relate what must have been a horrible day. I felt for him. He was a great guy and someone I really respected. On top of that, he was very supportive of me, and I would do everything I could to make him proud of me. With Wyatt gone, I'll need you to step into the breach, Carter, Johnson said. I know you can do it. You've proved yourself more than once, and I have complete confidence that you'll do a good job for Emerald. You're part of the future of this company, and I don't have any hesitation in giving you this opportunity. I won't pretend that I didn't expect this to happen. After all, Johnson really didn't have a lot of choices. Oh, he could get a headhunter and look for a new executive, but that would be expensive and time-consuming. I had pretty much guessed he would ask me to take the job, and I was prepared to accept. I'll do everything I can to warrant your trust in me, Johnson. I think I can bring some new ideas to the table when the time comes. I do have a suggestion and a request, however. Go ahead, he said, intrigued. I don't see any need to replace Wyatt with another person. I believe the operations department has the bodies it needs to do the job. It's a matter of redistribution of the resources. I would assume that I and the other vice presidents would report directly to you. Go on. Siobhan Mulcahy will continue to act as my personal assistant. She has been an invaluable aid in her first year with Emerald and has a full understanding of the position. She would be ideal as my backup. In addition, Donna Witherspoon has looked after Wyatt's desk for a number of years. I've found her to be very efficient and competent. I believe she could serve both Siobhan and myself effectively without being overworked. Essentially, we would be combining 4 jobs into 3. I saw Johnson smile for the first time that day. If you think you can do it that way, then I'm all for it. Are you sure about Ms. Mulcahy? More than sure, Johnson. I asked her to marry me on Saturday. She'll be a captive employee. I grinned. Mary? I didn't even know you were dating, he said in shock. We weren't. It's been one of those things that sort of crept up on us. We've been working closely for a year, and all that time I think I knew I was falling for her, and yet, we never even touched, much less dated. That's the strangest thing I've ever heard of, he said. Are you positive? Absolutely, I said with a big smile. I don't think I've ever been this positive about anything. Well, congratulations, he said with a big smile, rising and extending his hand. I guess I'd better go down to her office and offer her my congratulations as well. I haven't said anything about the realignment of the operations department to her, Johnson. I thought that I should wait until I talked to you. I wasn't sure if you would approve. Well then, I'll just keep it to your engagement for now. We can talk as a group when you've had a chance to tell her and Donna. Thank you, sir. I don't expect any problems, but I owe them an explanation of my thinking. Of course. I'll talk to you later then. Good luck, he said, extending his hand again. I walked down the hall with Johnson, stopping at Wyatt's office and Donna's desk. Donna, can I see you in the office, please? Yes, of course, she said, clearly nervous. I closed the door behind us and sat in one of Wyatt's big leather chairs while I motioned Donna to another. I take it you've heard the scuttlebutt about Wyatt? Yes. I can't believe what I'm hearing, though. Is it true about the boy, I mean? I nodded. Yes, unfortunately. He's tendered his resignation. He won't be back. What's going to happen to me? She asked with a worried look on her face. Do you think you can work for me? I smiled. I could see the relief in her face and her eyes beginning to glisten with tears. Oh, thank God. Yes, of course, Carter. I would be honored to work for you. It won't be the same job, Donna. It will be a combination of your old job and some of Siobhan's responsibilities. Siobhan will continue to be my personal assistant as long as she's able. What's going to happen to Siobhan? She asked, wide-eyed. Well, after we're married, she's going to be doing some of my old job and help you with the rest. She's planning on several children, so I'll need someone fully trained to take over for her. Someone I trust. I smiled. Married? You and Siobhan? That's wonderful. It's just what she was dreaming of, Donna said excitedly. Oh, she told you about her dreams, did she? Sorry, I didn't mean to give away any secrets. She's been in love with you for ages. I was beginning to wonder if you'd ever realize it. I'm so happy for you, she said sincerely. I'm a little slow on the uptake, but I got the message Friday night. Anyway, your new job will begin right away. I'll be moving into Wyatt's office as soon as it's convenient. I'll need you to show me around. Siobhan will take my office. She already knows every nook and cranny of it. I'll leave it to you to decide where you want to work. Right now, I'm happy where I am, especially with you in that office. It's going to be so much better now. This is wonderful news, despite what happened to Wyatt. I feel for Marion. She must be sick about this. Johnson talked to her and said she was really taken by surprise. I guess she had no idea about Wyatt's secret life. I've got to talk to Siobhan and congratulate her. She must be walking on air right now. We're both very happy, Donna. I know she'll be really pleased to be working with you too, but I haven't told her about the new structure, so let me talk to her first, please. Oh, of course. Thank you, Carter. Thank you so much. This is a big relief. Well, you were never in danger of being let go, Donna. That was never going to happen. I'm just glad we have an opportunity to give you a new challenge. I smiled and left to find Siobhan. It was time to fill my fiancée in on my plans. I found her sitting at her desk wearing a big smile and waiting for me. Johnson came to congratulate me, she beamed. He said I was very lucky to capture you. No one else had ever done that, and he wondered if you would ever get married. I guess I showed him. Huh? I leaned down and kissed her. You sure did, sweetheart. Now, come into the office. We need to talk. I laid out my plan for the department and I got a very big smile and thank you in response. We had talked beforehand about Johnson's limited options, and we both guessed he would ask me to assume the role. I was more delighted that my future bride would also be my work partner. Having Donna as our support was just icing on the cake. We had called Doogie and Sassy on Sunday and told them of our engagement, swearing them to secrecy until I had talked to Johnson and cleared my future role at Emerald. Both of them were delighted for us and somehow not surprised. That made me wonder until later when I learned Siobhan had confessed her love for me to Sassy and she, unable to keep a secret, had spilled the beans to Doogie. He, at least, had the good sense to say nothing to anyone. I had hired her as my personal assistant and she was perfect in the role. That I fell in love with her and would marry her was something I never expected, but would never regret. Of course, if we had all those children Siobhan was expecting, I would have to start looking for another personal assistant. Perhaps this time, it wouldn't be quite so personal. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.